Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to take a look how the industry has been impacted by this whole virus and what investors are doing, how it's going to be changing the industry. So the founder of Entourage Effect Capital said that the fact that cannabis was deemed essential was the shot in the arm that was really needed. The development is likely to lead to advances in conversations in DC, which we've mentioned on this podcast before. It just needed a calamity, an economic collapse, if you will, correction, whatever, for conservative constituents to be okay with the idea of legalizing cannabis on a nationwide scale. And so here we are, trillions of dollars printed, budget deficits out the window, and the plunge protection team just buying up securities left and right with BlackRock as a proxy, printing out money and buying up bonds and ETFs left and right. So Snoop Dogg's investment firm is called Casa Verde Capital, and one of their reps had mentioned that this whole pandemic can help speed up the legalization process while reminding investors and companies that legalization process have their own development times. So he goes on to say that this will be a critical point in terms of opening up the space from a banking point of view and getting institutional investors more comfort. But at the same time, it's not like the faucet just turns on and now the funding is going to come from all sources and you're paying with credit cards and all your dispensaries tomorrow. One of the partners at Attitude Investment Management had said that some cannabis companies are currently on life support with very short cash flow. And there's some investors saying that the company has less than 3 or 4 months cash runway. So they're in crisis mode. And that's mom and pops all the way to the publicly traded companies. We've seen private placements up in Canada. That's where publicly traded companies have to give sweetheart deals privately to companies in order to buy their stock in bulk. So we are kind of seeing that with cannabis companies taking a dip, some cases 80% retracement. A lot of that is going to be opportunities for investors if they can get to the right space. So we've mentioned that there's probably a better opportunity to come to an existing marketplace rather than an emerging market so that you don't have to deal with some of the regulatory issues. And I say that laughing in a way because there's always changes, there's always regulation. However, getting distressed assets, pennies on the dollar at this point in time is probably a better play if you haven't already gotten into space or if you want to expand. I would start with an existing market. So the companies that are on Casa Verde's platform, most notably on the ancillary side, actually increased revenue during this lockdown thanks to increased transaction rates. They include delivery platforms, track and trace providers, and point of sale companies. So we did mention that there are some opportunities on the rise, and the founder of our Arcadian Fund highlighted some specific consumer patterns that are surging during the lockdown periods of April and May. When stimulus checks came in, people were going to buy more cannabis directly. And so you're starting to see some people using the downtime to really identify with new products, especially with edibles. A lot of people either aren't working or want something that's going to last longer. And so you see topicals and tinctures decreasing in sales, whereas edibles are increasing in sales as people are kind of trying that out or wanting something that's going to be more long effective. And also there's some mental health right now. There's a lot of issues, a lot of stress, a lot of negativity, and people just want an escape. So the CEO of Focus Growth Capital Partners, he goes on to say that he thinks that telemedicine is going to be one of the first opportunities that patient and consumer consultants are trying to move to online at an accelerated rate. And so the ongoing trend in general medicine is catching up to medical cannabis, with over 24 states allowing for temporary remote prescribing. He thinks that the marketing by far is the biggest risk and opportunity. They need to be thinking about daily native marketing and the ability to communicate digitally, not in person, but paving the way for new technology, enabling brands to connect directly with the consumer. So this pandemic is crushing global merger and acquisition deals all over the world, not just cannabis, but just in general. And it's not just cannabis, it's basically every other commodity, including drugs. So the party drugs are losing out because of this virus. So the use of drugs like MDMA and cocaine are also decreasing around the world as clubs and events are on hiatus. There was a research project called Global Drug Survey that found that the use of cannabis, alcohol, and benzodiazepine was up during the pandemic. So there's a report from the research project Global Drug Survey that found that the use of cannabis, alcohol, and benzodiazepine was up during the pandemic. So 22% of the Irish people and 21% of Brits and Kiwis said that their alcohol consumption had increased a lot, citing that they had more time and that they were bored. Americans, on the other hand, are boozing less than originally thought during the pandemic. Generally speaking, sin stocks like alcohol, tobacco, gambling, defensive stocks, they all go up in times of stress or economic downturn. As a commodity, though, we're seeing kind of the opposite happening. So, cacao futures, for example, hit a 1 year low as the pandemic wrecks global consumption. Also, seeing coffee futures reach a new 15-year low. Cannabis, however, seems to be fairly steady, although the deals that encompass cannabis are crashing just like every other deal. Kind of just quickly dive in to see what's happening on the general overall market. According to Bloomberg, the merger and acquisition activity plunged 50% to $1 trillion in the first half of the year, making it the slowest period in deal making since 2012. First half of the global cannabis market was chaos. Lockdowns and virus pandemic crippled supply chains, crushed consumers that will likely result in a recovery phase over the next several years. And sentiment shifted from mid-March only after a rescue effort led by the Fed, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan, and the Bank of China, and slashing interest rates to zero and injecting trillions of dollars into global markets to try and stop the extreme volatility. And so while every major industry has been hurt, the financial sector has fared the best. However, M&A activity in Europe, Middle East, and Africa was down 32% during the same period. So the Asia Pacific region fared the best. Their merger or acquisition activity slipped just 7%. And a huge portion of that was commodities, dipping almost 40% in Asia. The global M&A bust, it was occurring well before the virus pandemic. So it was noted back in October 2020 that WeWork's catastrophic failed IPO damaged the capital market sentiment, likely the marking for an early IPO top, and also said back then that a slowdown in merger and acquisition deals is ominous sign that Wall Street banks will see declining revenue in the quarters ahead. And with that being said, depressed merger and acquisition activity may suggest that a V-shaped recovery is not possible in the second half of the year, making cannabis stocks all that much more important as they kind of have an inverse relationship overall to the economy during economic downturns, excluding times of extreme volatility in the very beginning. So when you have certain derivatives, like options and other vehicles like ETFs and indexes, it's going to take a long time for the margin, for the excess leverage to work its way out of all of those investment vehicles. So you will see an overall dip in everything that's precious metals and vice stocks and everything. But those vice stocks will surge back with crypto, with gold. But ultimately, they'll be the cleanest dirty shirt in the room. So with that, invest wisely. With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.